Hello there. Welcome to the Temple of the Goddess. I am hoping to talk today about the pillars of inner work, kind of seen from the vantage point of the Temple of the Goddess. The way that I see it having been shared with me, at least, around kind of what we do, like what we are called by the goddess to do in relationship with her, is kind of manifold and unique for each person. But one of the kind of primary ways that I see there being a bit of a split is this idea of inner work and outer work. So the idea of like works in the world, going out and doing a service project or cleaning up, an environmental site, or, giving food to, people who are in need, that might be considered outer work. Whereas inner work is the maybe slightly less tangible components of what you are being kind of guided toward in your own personal process. And I see there being kind of some specific markers to that process, to those different processes. And I think that there's value in kind of naming those pieces. I was talking the other day about assembling the council of selves. And that's, I would consider that to be part of a larger inner work chunk. So yeah, I'm just going to kind of lay those, kind of pillars out. One of them is ancestral work. So exploring your personal relationship to your ancestors. This can involve genealogy. This can involve, talking with living relatives. This can involve, if you were adopted, for instance, beginning to track the path of your ancestral journey of how you arrived here. The ancestral inheritance that you are the receiver of, and the living incarnation of that ancestral lineage in this moment. So for every person, that's going to be a unique journey. And I personally have found it to be incredibly interesting. Maybe that's just because I'm a history nerd, but I just consider ancestral work to be kind of a universal path as I've come to understand it. And I think it enriches everybody's understanding of who they are and their journey of how they got here. The one that I have already mentioned and talked a little bit more about, I talked about it as like assembling the council of selves. I'm going to kind of leave that there as, just assembling the council. There's the components of self, which, yeah, as I mentioned in that video, can take on multiple additional maybe constituencies depending on what shows up. But now I'm going to include in that council a larger subset, because there's the council of selves, but then there's this kind of inner council of guides and allies that also joins that piece. So while there's the council of selves might be the second pillar, gathering and relating to unseen allies and guides. This is a bit more complex to lay out here. But the first layer of allies and guides, I tend to find it's easiest to talk about within the framework of plants, animals, and minerals, representations of or spirits of those three particular realms of the living world, I find present themselves very naturally. This can be as simple as the initial study of plants, animals, minerals, and, finding things that have an affinity with you, or, like I was talking about with the crows, certain teachings from the natural world that might want to live in your practice, your path. But within the Temple of the Goddess, there's a slightly more formalized structure for making official those relationships. In popular language, we might refer to this as like finding your spirit animal, which is totally problematic nonsense in so many different ways that it's held within our current culture. I have received through official initiations with groups that I was originally part of, but have on my journey to the goddess, moved away from those organizations and largely have had the goddess kind of formalize and frame the rituals associated with seeking from the unseen, seeking from spirit, those guides and allies who want to and already are working with you, right? These are not things that I give you access to. These are not names that I think you should receive or anything like that. This is a process of inner discovery of those guides and allies that are there for you. So there's the ancestral piece, ancestral journey. There's the council of selves, which are like the constituencies of self, is the way I refer to them. And then there's the guides and allies joining the council. For me, for instance, the fox spirit, as I have come to know it, come into relationship with it, is an important part of my council. She and I have had a long relationship that once I had conscious access to her, I realized had always been there, but that I couldn't see until I had that conscious access. And I think most cultures have some framework for this to be held within. We are not seeking to validate or invalidate any particular cultural framework here. In fact, my belief, like all of these beliefs, are you're better off learning about as many of these practices as you can, so that you can deepen your own relationship, your own development of practice, find the things and ways that genuinely resonate with you in affirmation of who you are and what is really wanting to incarnate through you. I think that is an essentially, it's just an essential piece. It's just an essential piece. The next chunk of inner work is not, I don't believe that it is a universal path, but it is I think it's prevalent enough in today's modern world that many of us experience and suffer some form of trauma or traumatic event, that what I will say is like the inner healing process, the inner journey to integrating the wounded aspects of self. I talked about this a little bit through the shadow work lens earlier, but I consider shadow work to just be one component of the healing journey. So this kind of fourth pillar of the inner work is this kind of healing journey. If you are someone who has never experienced trauma or traumatic events, then bless you, and may the blessings continue to enact themselves in your life. And I welcome your participation with healing others. But the way that my teacher talked to me about it, and my healing, my work learning to be a healer really always unfolded for me, was around this framework that, as I mentioned, my teacher would often say, which is just healer, heal thyself, right? You want to be a healer, heal yourself first. Journey down the road of your own healing, and through doing so, become the healer that the world is calling you to be in the moment, right? But that by truly exploring the healing journey within yourself, at least I have found, you are able to take the techniques of healing way beyond their theoretical conception, right? And into the level of deep application, deep understanding, deep effectiveness through healing within yourself. And I find that we become much more effective in our healing practice when we're engaging with it in that way. So that's a big chunk for me. Healing as healer, heal thyself. And then the final pillar, this kind of fifth pillar of the inner work, is what I would refer to as mysticism, which can include, but not necessarily have to include, things like psychedelic experiences, journeying work, astral projection. This is where the trippy shit lives, is what I'm trying to say. This is where the out there stuff, the journeys out of the body, that's a reference to Robert Monroe of the Monroe Institute, and is a good example of what I mean when I talk about the mystical experience functionalized. And a lot of the work that we do here is actually kind of pretty influenced by that modality of going about approaching inner work. So, and that's where we start to develop techniques and tools for altering consciousness, is really what I mean to say. And using those altered states of consciousness to apprehend larger swaths of the unseen, larger swaths of the manifest reality, and begin to explore the cosmology in deeper and deeper ways. And I consider that to be inner work. Once we've deepened that relationship of mysticism, kind of internally to a fine enough level, that's where what is maybe more commonly referred to as magic would then kind of naturally grow out of that mysticism, where we are looking for how to take those mystical or shamanic sorts of experiences and bring them into how can I be of service through that, right? And things like magic, or even just being with people through altered states of consciousness, et cetera, are, I believe, deeply informed by one's own depth of exploration of the mystical path. We can look at Christian mystics, we can look at mystics from any faith tradition. There are genuine people who are, I believe, developing techniques and technologies for the direct apprehension of the divine, of the sacred, of spirit, that allows, I think, for us to really deepen. And for me, these 5 pillars of work, the ancestral journey, the the constituencies of self is kind of how I refer to them, this kind of council of selves, the meeting and formalizing relations with guides and allies, the healing journey within, and the integration of mysticism through techniques and technologies that are effective for you and your particular consciousness. Kind of create a lattice work of techniques that work in at least the way that I've kind of received these practices over the years is they're meant to work together, right? It's not like, oh, okay, now I'm doing the ancestral thing, that'll last for this long, and then I go on to this thing and that'll last for this long. They're meant to interweave and co-mingle within you. And as I've mentioned, and I will continue to mention, these things unfold through your life, right? So what's naturally unfolding for you and through you is the work, right? That is the field in which your exploration is valuable. So there's just kind of this like deep appreciation that I feel myself kind of arriving at for just being able to say those 5 pillars out loud. I'm in so many moments as I'm talking about these things, they're not theoretical, they're experiential. And so much of it feels connected to memory. Much of it feels connected to my own work with these things. A lot of time in nature, a lot of time sitting quietly and connecting with these various different layers and levels of work, and the kind of life-changing moments that I've had within myself that have really altered my trajectory over and over and over again, further and further away from what I believe to be kind of a popular consensus view of the world that we currently possess as a culture, as a species. These things are not, none of these things are foreign to anybody who is engaging in their own practice. I think no matter what faith tradition you might come across somebody engaging in, if you really engaged in deep conversation around respecting them and their path and their work, you would see elements of these things showing up all over the place in various different ways, various different techniques, various different technologies. And because we are, by our very nature, uh, interfaith practitioners in a genuine sense, not from the idea of saying like we are the one faith and we're interested in kind of learning more about these others, but interfaith in terms of being able to perceive anybody's faith journey as inherently sacred, inherently beautiful, inherently carrying and holding lessons and teachings for us. I think that one of the core pillars for me is being able to integrate what we see from others' faith journeys, what we see from other people's paths, as just inherently valid and inherently important and inherently sacred. Uh, there's probably more I'll have to say on, you know, how we can integrate the strange as well as the consensus faith traditions as well, as part of this like deep work of integrating other people's faith traditions into our kaleidoscope of reality. Yeah, so that's all. Just again, continuing to practice talking about this stuff, continuing to gain a lot inside myself in a way that, you know, just gives me this really beautiful opportunity to share gratitude for, again, these very strange cybernetic tools here that are allowing me to gain a little bit of external feedback in a way that I deeply appreciate. So yeah, those are the 5 pillars of inner work. Thanks.